Maybe you hired an attorney, or maybe you're in the process of hiring an attorney. And maybe you're thinking, I only have to hire an attorney because I have to go to court and things are just going to be complicated and difficult. My spouse is difficult. This is never going to settle. And that's where I'm going to go. Well, if that's what you're thinking, this episode's for you because we're going to be discussing another road, which is mediation and collaboration. Those words can be used in high conflict divorces. Okay, trust me. One thing I want to talk about, though, there's a front door to mediation and a back door. The front door is where you're proactive, where you, before you spend all that money, you actually go to mediation. And the back door is where it's reactive, where you're sort of forced or feel forced to go to it because you're exhausted and you have no other options. I want to talk about both of those in this episode. All right, let me give you a little story to show you my experience with mediation. Now, I've been practicing for a few years, then I started in a partnership with another firm, and then I started my own firm, and I was fortunate enough to have a top dog attorney, an elite attorney who referred me some cases. And one of the cases they sent to me was a post-divorce matter. So these people who were already divorced, but they still had issues post-divorce. And it turned out that this couple spent over $1 million in their divorce, which I was shocked when I heard that, which is unfortunately more common than you think, especially in big cities like New York. But they were still fighting. And the issue didn't seem that complicated. The issue was that my client was owed some money, but there were some qualifications if that money was supposed to be paid. The other side said those qualifications weren't met. I think that was more of a smokescreen, and I think it was pretty clear that my client should get that money. Since I'm a reasonable attorney, at least at the beginning, if everyone's being cooperative, I sent a letter to the other side. I hope we could just resolve it. They spent so much money. They got divorced. Why can't they just move on with their lives? But of course, they were still being very difficult. So I had to make an application to the court. And this is like a motion. And we had to spend some time doing papers. And then you have to go to court. This is not virtual court. This is pre-COVID. You have to go to court and, take off that day. So we were in court, and it turns out the judge that we got was a judge I knew very well. He actually presided over my first trial. So maybe he was more of like a father figure because he was giving me pointers in that trial how to do better. I told my story about what's going on, and the judge is like, I'm going to listen to all those arguments, but first I want to send you all to mediation. My face was like, mediation? These people are so difficult. This is never going to be resolved in mediation. So I said to the judge, Your Honor, with all due respect, I could even get without all due respect. With all due respect is what you say, like when you disagree with the judge, but you're trying to be respectful. And he wasn't having any of it. He says, Mr. Shapiro, we're going to try mediation first. So that was my entryway into doing mediation with a high conflict couple. And we go to this master mediator. And the first few sessions was just, groundwork. Everyone's sort of in their positions, being challenging, but he was working through it. And then after a few sessions, he got us all to work together. We did this exercise where we were able to suggest from each side what was important to us and then rate that. And it was sort of like problem solving. And that matter with these difficult people who spent over $1 million in their divorce was resolved within maybe 5 mediation sessions. And I couldn't believe the magic because I'm like, this is amazing. And I wish more people can do it. Now, remember, these people went through it through the back door, post-divorce, and with a mediation-friendly attorney. And that was before all my trainings. So it really changed my thought process on what mediation is all about and who it can really serve. There's 3 main types of mediation that you may come across. And I want you to think of it like flavors of soda. Okay. The first flavor is evaluative. And evaluative is very good for traditional lawyers because it's what we're used to. Evaluative is where you have either a retired judge or a very experienced divorce attorney giving you a reality check, telling you what most likely will happen in court. Okay, that's evaluative. So if you're in a fantasy world, evaluative mediation could really help people, if they're going to listen to the mediators, get back into reality. The second flavor, thinking about sodas, is facilitative. This is where you move people from positions to interests. A position is, I want the house. An interest is, I want stability for my children. And it's much easier to help people come up with options for interest than it is for positions, because they become polarized and it's very narrow-minded. Now, the third flavor, it's really a little bit of a trick, is transformative mediation, but it's not really a flavor at all. It reminds me of, if you go to the movies, and if your movie theater is a little bit like mine, you have this soda machine that gives you the option of basically any soda that you want, all these different flavors. But if the soda machine is not working, you don't get any flavors at all. And that's what really transformative mediation is. It's really dealing with the soda machinery. The mediator's taking the position that they're working on the soda machinery, and once they fix that machinery, you're going to be able to problem solve. You're going to be able to choose any flavor you want. And who am I to help you? You can figure it out all yourselves. The issue is just that conflict. So that's transformative mediation. Okay, those are the three flavors. Now, I know it's a lot, and sometimes it's hard to get people into mediation. And sometimes it's scary to go to mediation. So if you need a little bit more support, I'm just going to touch on two different options. The first option is collaborative divorce. Collaborative divorce is where you have specially trained attorneys who don't go to court. They don't go to court. And there's no incentive for them to be difficult, to posture. All they try to do is work on settling your case. Okay. Now, you can bring your attorney to mediation. So it's similar to collaborative divorce, but the collaborative divorce is a little different than mediation because you still have an attorney who's going to advocate for you and support you maybe more outside of the mediation sessions. It would be like you can send settlement letters, you can have different types of conferences. So it's a little bit more support. And then finally, you could just have a traditional attorney who's more cooperative, which, I think I really appreciate that. I go to court, but I'm also very cooperative. I always think in most cases, diplomacy before war. Try to resolve things. So those are your flavors of mediation. Now, my core message to you is mediation is not giving up. It's choosing resolution before exhaustion chooses it for you. That's really what we're talking about here. My action step is try that diplomacy before war. If you don't have an attorney, some people call me up and they don't necessarily have the resources, they need some help. I always tell them, go to a mediator. Now remember, a mediator is not an attorney for you. They're the mediator. A couple can go to the mediator and they can help them and save them a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy. And even if you do have an attorney, you can go to mediation without your attorney, and that mediator can still help you. And if the mediation doesn't work, you can always try another option. All right, remember, this podcast, my book, my whole teaching is about stressing to you that you're the president. You are the president in your divorce. This is like president's school, helping you make better decisions. Your attorney's the general. They carry out the mission. But if the president can make better decisions, it's going to lead to the general being more constructive and less destructive. And that's why attorneys, I think, get a bad name, because they can be very destructive, unfortunately. All right, next episode, we're going to focus on the court system. You did everything you can to try to resolve your divorce outside of court. You did all the pre-work, but, you got to go to court. You got to have a court conference. You got to take off from work and all that stress. And we're going to talk about that in our next few episodes. I'm Corey Shapiro. This is the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast. Let's step forward with clarity together.
This podcast offers general information only. It cannot replace legal advice. If you need tailored advice, contact an attorney licensed to practice in your area.